Hello and welcome to another edition of the Wrap Up, the Raptors Republic live post-game show on YouTube and on the podcast network, where we are also uh, kind of replacing Samson Folks' Raptors Reaction podcast as he has lost his voice and is unable to do it tonight. So welcome if you are a regular Raptors Reaction podcast viewer and you're just tuning in. I'm Oren Weisfeld. I'm going to be joined in just a moment by producer and guest on tonight's episode, Keon Haddad. We just witnessed the Toronto Raptors lose once again, 114 to 105 to the Brooklyn Nets, but that score is being very generous as the Raptors really never stood a chance in this game. Pulled off another nice fake comeback late, and that was kind of, they brought it to within 6 or 7 or something at one point, and that was the closest they got it. But for the vast majority of the game, they were just getting crushed by the Brooklyn Nets. They allowed, again, 40 points in the first quarter for the second straight game after what happened in New Orleans, which was another blowout. And yeah, I mean, it was good to see the Raptors kind of fight back and show some fight, especially Scotty before kind of tweaking his knee. Really showed some fight in the beginning of the fourth quarter there, and they did pull it to within a 3-possession game. So credit to the Raptors for that. But I think I want to start at the beginning of the game because the Raptors, this game got away from them right at the beginning. And it was just another really similar game to New Orleans where they came out with just nothing. Like, they're learning the hard way that the NBA season is a real grind, and you can't just kind of like I don't want to swear, but like you can't just come into these games and kind of expect anything. You have to be uber prepared, and that comes down to like routine. It comes down to getting a good night's sleep. It's like sounds like really simple things, but like doing the scout, watching film, and just like coming to the game with a competitive like energy to where you're ready to be physical and play from the opening whistle. And the Raptors for the last 2 games just haven't been, and they kind of play themselves into that as the game goes on, into that competitive spirit, and they're just not really talented enough to get away with that. And more to the point, like, I think more concerning than that is that this is like a organization that has prided itself for years on being the hardworking team, right? Like being the team that is just gonna go after loose balls and do those little things better than their opponents, and they're gonna win in the margins, even if they don't have as much talent. They've always kind of won in those margins, and this whole season, I don't think they've done that consistently. They haven't won on the second night of a back-to-back. They'll have another opportunity to do that tomorrow, but that's just like one little example that shows like on the second night of a back-to-back, when you're tired, do you bring it, or do you, like most teams, kind of fall apart? And yeah, the Raptors haven't brought that energy consistently enough. So Keon, I'll bring you on here, and I guess just let's start there in terms of the way the Raptors have started these last 2 games. How concerned are you, and is there anything that you've been seeing at the start of the games that has caught your eye?
I mean, it's kind of crazy if you look how the week started against Cleveland. They allowed
Yep.
80 points all game, 88 points all game. And then the next 2 games, it just looks like the effort has just taken a huge dip. Just wide open cutters, just not hustling on the boards like we're used to seeing. It just seems like an effort problem at this point. Like, guys getting blown by consistently, just weak help, weak weak help in the passing lanes. Like it's I'm pretty concerned because we were making the excuses about injuries, but I know we're still missing a couple guys, but mostly everyone except Precious is
Mm-hmm.
back. Like Pascal's back, Scotty's back, Gary's back. Like it's starting to get concerning. They're 3-9 on the road now, and it just seems like a lack of effort. And like when you look on paper, it's a lot of lengthy, athletic guys who you hope like can create like effort at least. Just if those players can give effort, then the defense should not look this bad, especially at
Mm-hmm.
the start. So yeah, it's a bit concerning for me at least. But
Yeah.
We'll see how it can change.
No, me too. I think you made up a good point about the injuries. I'm glad you brought that up because on the broadcast, they were kind of at the beginning of the game making a bunch of kind of excuses in terms of, oh, it's a new starting lineup. They don't really have chemistry together. They're just getting back from injuries. The Nets are actually the team missing Ben Simmons and missing Yuta Watanabe, two players that are actually crucial to what they do, whereas the Raptors are missing Otto and Precious, good players, no doubt, but guys who haven't really figured into the rotation at all this season. So every rotation player is healthy for the Raptors. So that's no excuse. And if you want to talk about the chemistry side of things, I've seen a lot of Nick Nurse talk on the timeline, and I really want to get into that because I have some opinions on it. But like I do think in terms of the chemistry aspect, this is kind of what happens when you change the starting lineup because that fivesome with Gary and Scotty and the small group, say what you will about it, they couldn't really rebound. There was definitely some problems with it, but they did have chemistry. They had this budding chemistry growing together, I thought. And I was saying in the offseason, put Gary on the bench. I think it I think basically like Nick should have done that in the offseason. If he wanted to move Gary to the bench, because they played so many minutes together that fivesome, they got a routine and they built all this chemistry. And now Gary goes to the bench and the new fivesome, it's true, it doesn't really have chemistry. There's not really a clear hierarchy I found where Pascal is obviously the guy, but it doesn't really look like he's the clear, yeah, at least in a game like this, like I wanted to see him have more of the ball in the first half when guys were just Fred would take a bad shot, then Scotty would take a bad shot, then Gary would take a bad shot, Boucher, and it was just like, can we have Pascal, our best player, handle the ball here a little bit and like consistently? Let's talk about Nick Nurse, basically. So yeah, I guess I'll ask your opinion on it first. Like people are calling for Nick Nurse's job because Raptors fans are crazy. But I think there is something to be said to the idea that this style of play, it can grind on people. And if you're not giving 100% in Nurse's kind of system, then it falls apart really quick. And there's no half-assing this system. There's no 50%ing this system. You have to go at 100% or it completely collapses. So, yeah, do you think there's anything to that point about Nick either having to change the system or maybe a different coach?
I think a different coach is a bit excessive at this point. We've seen Nick do wonders with this team in the past. He won Coach of the Year when no one expected the Raptors to be anything after Kawhi left. Basically, a 60-win season right after he left. Obviously, a championship. I know this last stretch here for the Raptors, the defenses looked really porous, but I mean, I wouldn't call for a coaching change. I don't think there will be one at all. And when it comes to the strategy, I mean, it's the same strategy as last year. I mean, you have to. It's well, like you said, it's about effort, and that's just the main like stem of this is the effort on the defensive end. And I look at like players like Scotty, like today, like he didn't have it on the defensive end, and it's honestly like you can see a regression from last year on the defensive end, where he's just like last year, like he was giving more energy and more effort on that end. And this year, he's just letting guys blow by him on a consistent basis. Um, like Sumner was getting right by him all game, and it's to the point where it's an effort type of thing. And about the starting lineup that you brought up earlier, I agree with you with the chemistry. I mean, the Raptors are starting a guy that we expected to be in the G League this year, and
Hmm.
that's no knock on Koloko. He does his role. He plays his role well. But I mean, I would personally like to see Gary or even Thad, who only played 4 minutes today. Like in like the last few weeks, we've seen him have a real big impact on this team, and 4 minutes is just not enough for me. And Birch today, I thought he gave great effort, and I thought he was giving the Raptors something after that slow start, and he only played that one short stint in the first quarter with 4 minutes. So
Yeah.
I'd like the rotations from Nick to be better, but like at the end of the day, with the defensive strategy, it's really just about effort, and I don't know how much you can really change.
Yeah. I think Koloko. there's no reason he should be starting. It's twice in a row now against the Nets where Claxton has just schooled him.
Mhm.
And yeah, maybe you're trying to match size for size there, but then like you said, go Birch if you want like a traditional center in there. That's frustrating me. And there's reasonable quibbles to have with Nick Nurse. But my thing is like with people calling for his job is like there's no system, there's no scheme, there's no game plan that could have won this game if the Raptors are going to come out the way they did and play without energy on defense, give up rebounds because they're not boxing out, take bad shots. It's just basketball fundamentals that they're messing up right now, and those are not things that you can blame on the coach. Like again, there was just no scheme that you can blame for this game. It wasn't I actually thought they did good things against KD and Kyrie this
Mhm.
game. Other guys hit shots, but yeah, like they didn't rotate out quick enough to those other guys. And some of that was just an effort thing, or it was losing a guy for a backdoor cut, or it was giving up a second chance point and like a rebound and then a clear pass to an open three. It was a lot of that. So I don't understand how after a game like this, you can go on Twitter and be like, Nick Nurse, his job, he can't do it. It's like, okay, maybe do that after like a game where the Raptors get out coached or out schemed, but don't do it after a game where they get outplayed. Um, because yeah, I did mention earlier that like there's something to be said about his style of play grinding on guys and you like guys having to give 100% effort. And I do understand if there's some frustration with guys kind of getting just tired of that. But my thing is, what's the alternative? Do you want a Tibbs in here who just plays vets and just plays drop coverage? And then the Raptors have, yeah, their floor is a little bit higher, but their ceiling's a lot lower. Like I would always rather have the coach who's going to coach the highest possible ceiling, even though there might be some things that go wrong. And some nights it looks really, really bad, like tonight. But I don't blame that on him. I really blame it on like I don't know if these guys have been drinking in New Orleans and in New York these past 2 nights, but it feels like it. Like genuinely, like this is a young team, and it feels like they're just coming out uh, for these games, like kind of laughing, like it's okay. Like we'll get serious when the playoffs come around. We made the playoffs last season. We'll be back there, and by that time, I'm gonna be serious. And I think this is a good time to transition to Scotty because you kind of mentioned some things. I think there have been some concerning things with Scotty this season. I don't think it's as bad as people are making it out to be, but the body language is problematic. It doesn't look like he's as locked in as he was last year, and it doesn't look like he's having as much fun as he did last year either.
Yeah, I mean, last year it just looked like no one was expecting him to take that leap. Everyone was obviously talking about how like the Raptors, that was a bad pick. It should have been Suggs, and he wanted to make a point that he was the right pick all along. And you can tell last year he was campaigning for that Rookie of the Year. Like he was always talking about it in interviews. He said how big it was for his legacy. And now it just looks like I don't really see the issue. I mean, like if you look at his numbers offensively, like they look all right. Like 17 points, 9 rebounds, the 7 turnovers is not what you want. And some of those turnovers were just really like like mistakes you just don't want to see. That flagrant too. That angle doesn't really do it justice. They did show another replay from the side a
Yeah.
bit,
At
but
first I was like, why are they reviewing this? And then I was like, yeah, that's probably the right call. Like it was a frustration foul.
yeah, because that was right after that blow by play that you just showed. Like that was
Mm.
probably a couple possessions later. So I mean, you want him to get better. You want him to be better, and especially with like rookies around him, they're starting to take or players from his draft class taking a bit of a leap. Like you want him to get better because that's really where the trajectory of this Raptors team goes. Is how good he goes because his ceiling is really the Raptors ceiling. He in the offseason we were talking about how we were keeping him instead of Kevin Durant and all this, and he has superstar potential. And I know it's just 10 games or 20 games into his sophomore season, but he has not showed that so far.
Yeah, and like for me at least, I'm not really worried about the long-term upside at all. Like nothing has
Mhm.
changed for me in terms of his long-term how good he can be because he continues to show these flashes that we've never seen before. He continues to show flashes of elite defense. His shooting has gotten a lot better, which I think has really been underplayed this season. But at least for the present, it's probably the most important skill that he could develop. Like right now, we don't need Scotty to be a number one guy who brings it up the court and initiates offense. We need him to be a bit of a floor spacer with Pascal and a guy, a connective passer. So the shooting is big for me, and we see all these good flashes. But yeah, like in terms of the right now, I think he is just having this struggle to transition to, again, like the grind of the NBA season. Like it's clear to me that he's not getting up for every game with the same like enthusiasm that he did last season. Like some games he's kind of treating as again, we'll be in the playoffs, so I'll try then. But right now, like I just don't really want to put my body on the line that way. I don't really want to like, you know, go into the post every possession or take it into a guy's chest every possession or sit down on defense and lock in every possession. But he's learning the hard way that they need that from him. And like he's not good enough to not do those little things and to have success. Like as talented as he is, he needs to do all the little things on top of the kind of natural skill that he has if he wants to have a lot of success this season. So yeah. Any last points on Scotty?
I think we basically covered it. I think we should like. I think it'll get better. I don't think this is something we should expect all year.
Yeah. And I'll say this though, like there are people, these always happen in these debates where people take one side or the other and say like, no, you can't like criticize Scotty's body language. You're not there or whatever. Or then there's people on the other side who are like, he's terrible, trade him. And it's like, no, I think we can criticize the body language because we saw what he did last season and he looked like a different player. And at the same time, he has still had games this season where he looks even better than he did last season. So it's somewhere in between those two things. And you don't have to like take a side and not let anyone argue the other one. Anyways, let's talk about some good things. Who do you want to like talk about on the Raptors here that you thought had a good game or that you thought maybe bounced back in a way?
I mean, someone who I actually was quite impressed with was Gary Trent today. Off the bench, he only came off the bench one time last year. This year, it's his second or third straight game, I believe. And when the Raptors at the start were struggling mightily offensively, he came in today again. Basically, the same thing he did in New Orleans and gave him a spark, lit up that fake comeback that we love to talk about. He had 16 points. He was 6 of 11, and he was 2 steals back like last year after Nick Nurse criticized him. He was getting the passing lanes and giving more effort on defense, which is just exactly what you want to see from him. I don't know if this means you put him back in the starting lineup because I feel like you might want this production off the bench and maybe start a more traditional big, but not Koloko at preferably in the starting five like Birch.
Yeah, I
Maybe
think Precious
when he comes back.
is ideal when he's back. Yeah.
And we know Nick said that's not for a couple more weeks. At
Oh,
least
I think it'll be like
more.
a month and a half ish.
Yeah. So I mean, until then, it could be Thad, it could be Juancho even as well. Who
I like Thad. I really
I
like
like
Thad as that starting center.
Me too. I mean, but like I said earlier, 4 minutes tonight is not what you want. I feel like he can bring much more to this team.
Yeah.
Like a much better veteran leadership to this team when they're down big in the first quarter, down, allowing 41 points, 40, having him out there can really help keep the team together to stop that run. But yeah, Gary looked great today. He looked great in the game against New Orleans, one of the few bright spots. And obviously Pascal, I mean, he was good today as well. 24 points, 7 rebounds, 4 assists, and pretty efficient from the field. Not like exactly what you want from him, but you need the help around him.
Well, I would say very efficient. 7 for 15 and 11 free throws. Pascal is so unselfish that he almost always like makes the right play and passes it to his teammates. And the Raptors as a whole have a really like democratic offensive system, but his teammates need to do a way better job of finding him. Like, because 15 shots tonight isn't enough when you needed offense. And OG and Van Vliet are taking the same amount of shots, especially Fred, but that's another issue. Yeah, his teammates need to find him more, because otherwise he's not going to take the proper amount of shots that I think. Like, his skill on offense is so much higher than anyone else on this team that he should be taking most nights the vast majority of the shots. But that's only going to happen if guys find him and make the extra pass, and because he is going to get off the ball just naturally. The other guys I would shout out is OG, just start to finish a really, really solid game. Like, he was the one guy tonight I wasn't getting mad about. Like, his shot selection was good, defense was good as ever. Good game. And then honestly, Boucher, like, it's not gonna pop off the stat sheet, but he was a plus 12, so that pops. He's the only plus player, and he's plus 12. So that actually is amazing. And it wasn't a great game, like, scoring wise, but yeah, like the rebounding, and I just thought he was really active. There was at least 2 plays where he closed out on someone and they traveled because they just didn't really expect him to get there. So those guys deserve some shout outs. And then yeah, Gary Trent, definitely definitely glad you brought him out. I'm trying to find a good play for our new segment that I'm trying to introduce.
Okay.
Our clean play of the game. So let me just find this here. Okay, we'll give it to Chris Boucher. This is our new segment, guys. If you could get a banner up, please, Keon. This is our Manscaped clean play of the day. Because yeah, Manscaped, new sponsor. Go to manscaped.com if you're in Canada. If you're in America, wherever you are, go to manscaped.com and look into it, because honestly, Christmas is right around the corner. Get your Christmas shopping out of the way early. Don't leave it to the last minute. Go on now, get it shipped in a couple days, wrap it. And I got an example here of a little box you can get for your loved ones, right? It comes with some creams, some ointments, comes with a shaver, and it comes with like a facial trimmer. And yeah, like, it's for your private parts, but I think this box is a great Christmas present, and it's about $60 minus 20%. That's a great, and they have all types of like other boxes kind of like this. So yeah, go to manscaped.com for 20% off using the code WRAPUP, and we would appreciate it. It's a great way to support the show, even if you don't need a ball trimmer. You can go to Manscaped, use the wrap up code, and we will benefit from it. So that was our Manscaped clean play of the game, by a little rejection here from Chris Boucher. All right, is there anything else we want to hit on before we get out of here? Are there any questions you saw, or
Do we want to bring up Fred tonight?
Do I want to bring up Fred tonight? Well, what do you want to say?
I mean, obviously, this isn't the game you want from him, but the thing that's worrying to me is he's all like his reputation is that he's a good, gritty defender. And obviously, like, yeah, he's gritty in there, but like, it's been a struggle. He's just not playing defense without fouling. And I feel like you just need more out of him. And he's getting frustrated out there a lot. He like arguing with the refs. Like, he's supposed to be your leader, and he didn't really keep the Raptors afloat. Like when they're allowing wide open threes and not rotating, and it just seemed like you want more out of him because he is like the lead. He's supposed to be the leader of this team, and this is not like the game you wanted. You want more out of him. Your all-star especially, but that was frustrating for me. I wish he would have, helped out the team a bit more, because he really didn't on the offensive end, on the court, off the court, didn't do much for us tonight. And in the most minutes too, 41. I mean,
yeah, I think offensively sorry, like, these games you have to just live with Fred VanVleet. Like, he's such a good shooter that sometimes he's gonna just keep shooting, and it's gonna be frustrating, and they're gonna not go down all night. But you got to live with them, because we've seen countless times he'll all of a sudden hit 4 threes in a row, right? So offensively, I'm kind of like okay with it. I do get frustrated when he drives it into the lane and tries to finish over the trees and it just doesn't go well. So there is definitely some shot selection that I've always been frustrated with Fred, but you just kind of have to live with it because honestly, he deserves to take some of those shots
Mhm.
with everything he's kind of given to the franchise. But I think you make a great point defensively. Like he hasn't been able to contain the dribble nearly as well as I think he has in past seasons. And when you now have Gary and Scotty also not containing the dribble very well, it's a problem. And that's actually why I was in favor of taking Gary out of the starting lineup is because both Fred and him were both getting picked on, and having two guys in there to get picked on is just it's too much. Um, so yeah, I don't really know how to explain it with Fred, like why he hasn't been able to keep guys in front of him and like you said, defend the pick and roll without fouling. Um, but it is a little bit concerning. I ultimately think Fred is gonna get fine, like be fine, and as the season goes on, he's just gonna get better. I think he's kind of taking the opposite approach that he did last year, where he played so well in the first half and then his body gave out. It seems to me like he's trying to do everything to play well in the second half. Um, so that's kind of where I'm at. Uh, Phoenix play Z. Thank you for the tip. You did have a question. It was very complicated, so I passed it over. But since you tipped us so graciously, we will get to your question. So you basically said we're in the sixth percentile in isolation offense, only 0.7 points per possession on those plays, which is not good at all. So why don't we run more dribble handoffs? So basically, we're really efficient in dribble handoffs, and getting those guys, OG, Pascal, Scotty, downhill should be a priority. Yeah, I think it's a good point. I think it's really hard to look at numbers and then say, why don't we put that into practice? Like, there's just so much going on that I don't like to like isolate one number or like one play type and say like we're efficient in it. Let's do it a lot more because I just think so much more goes into that. Um, but I do agree, like, I've always said with OG especially, like, they gotta find ways to get him already going downhill. I don't think it's as much of a problem now because he's kinda just become really good at doing it himself. But, yeah, do you have anything to say on this?
I mean, yeah, if you look at the numbers, it's obviously you're trying to go downhill, but you got to look at the flow of the game as well. And I mean, yeah, the isolation. I in the New Orleans game, it was a lot of ISO heavy ball to start the game, and it was not working. And the same can be said for today. So obviously, the dribble handoffs last year, they worked fine. So I mean, you want to obviously keep that going. And I think that like you like to say, you obviously like these players like setting dribble handoffs every play. It's not something like as an athlete out there you want to do every single possession. You want to like all these players are players like Siakam and Fred and OG are players that want to get their one-on-one tries and get their one-on-one ISOs. And for Fred and or Pascal and OG, like it works out pretty well. But obviously for Fred, we've seen him trying to go in with the trees, like you said earlier, not working. So yeah, I'd like to see dribble handoffs more as well.
Yeah, like, I think this is kind of also a more general question about the Raptors just running an offense. Like, they don't run an
Mhm.
offense, let's be really frank. Like, Nurse has talked about liking guys giving guys freedom on offense because it helps them buy into the defensive end, and if you're gonna ask guys to play a crazy style of defense, he feels like you have to give them something, and what he gives them is, like, offensively, go do your thing, like, isolate if you need to. And people have been complaining about this for years. The Raptors do isolate way too much, and they don't really run enough set plays, and they just don't have a really like an offensive system, I wouldn't say. But the problem with these numbers is that like isolations, it's always going to be bad points per possession rather than like KD and Kyrie because most of those or a lot of those isolations happen at the end of the shot clock when that's your only option is to isolate and get something up. And dribble handoffs on the opposite is like there's tons of dribble handoffs going on all the time in the game, but this number 1.11 is only on plays that are finished, like a dribble handoff that actually results in a shot going up, right? It doesn't just count as a dribble handoff at the perimeter. Okay, and now I swing the ball. This is for a dribble handoff that leads directly to a shot. And these are just harder. Like, this is just a lower volume, and that's why I think the efficiency is easier to be higher. It's because the volume of dribble handoffs that actually result in a shot is lower because defenses stop it the majority of the time, right? Whereas in isolation, the defense can do all it can. You're still probably going to get a shot up at the rim. So I do think that's the problem with like just looking at it as at a points per possession basis. But I take your point, and I do think like the Raptors, they could definitely run more of an offense. There's no doubt about that. All right. One more sponsor. I know we're doing 2 now, so forgive us, loyal listeners. We're trying to space it out a little bit. We'll be quick, but we gotta always do our wrap-up player of the game, our Can-Am Tax Man of the Night. I almost forgot it. It's been so long. Tax Man of the Night. I'm gonna give it to, I think Gary Trent Jr. deserves it. Gary with the Can-Am Tax Man of the Night. You know, he just like he has come off the bench and just been really mature about it, and he's been able to just inject something into games as soon as he gets in there. And I mean, it is kind of his natural place, just in terms of there's a ton of these kind of guys who are just sharpshooters who come off the bench and give their team a spark. I think he's done that. I do think there's an argument to keep him in the starting lineup too, just because the spacing is so needed. But credit to him to be able to do either one and kind of just come in games off the bench, not be discouraged. And I think he deserved the tax man tonight. He was really instrumental in that run where they brought it back at the end. The only run that made this game at all entertaining. So just for the entertainment value alone, I will give it to Gary.
Yeah,
Phoenix says, just, yeah, were you going to say something?
I was just going to say, to your point about Gary, it's also impressive how he's being sure about it in a contract year as well. I know it's hard for contract players in the contract year to accept a role off the bench, but I mean, in 2 games, he's looked great so far.
For sure. Yeah, and I'll be very curious to see what happens with him at the trade deadline and at the end of the season. But that's a topic for another day. Just before we get out of here, Phoenix brought up the idea of playing a more heliocentric style around Pascal. I think there is like, this is kind of, I would just say that's kind of short-term thinking. Like, in a playoff series, is that the best way to maximize every offensive possession? Probably, yeah. But is Scotty going to be happy just spotting up every possession when Pascal runs the offense? Is OG going to be happy after there was rumors about him? Is Gary going to be happy? Like, you have to take into consideration that all of these guys want their touches. All of these guys want to expand their wings and develop and try different things. So that's why I'm not in favor of like a Luka kind of offense on the Raptors. But I do understand it in terms of if you're just looking for results right now, yeah, it would probably be a better offense. I'm not going to lie. But yeah, the Raptors are thinking long-term with this stuff. And that's actually why I like Nick Nurse as a coach so much, is everything he does is with a idea for the future. And sometimes it looks ugly, but yeah, he's trying to develop guys, and he's trying to like help this team reach their ceiling down the road. All right. We got our 2 sponsors out. We talked for 34 minutes about Raptors getting their ass beat by the Brooklyn Nets. We covered for Samson folk on the Reaction Podcast. I feel like we've done a lot of hard work tonight, and we deserve a drink, whatever makes you happy, Keon, after this. So, is there something you're going to do after this to reward yourself?
Post the podcasts. I'm going to go to bed. That's enough Raptors for me tonight.
It's bedtime for Keon. All right. Thank you to all our listeners on the YouTube. Subscribe and like it on the podcast network. Give us 5 stars if you've never done that. It helps the whole Raptors Republic team. And leave a comment. And we will be back tomorrow. I hope someone will be able to host tomorrow. But yeah, we should be back tomorrow when the Raptors take on the Orlando Magic in Toronto on the second night of a back-to-back. Until then, thanks again for listening, and have a good night, everyone.